How are you guys doing? Today is Sunday, May 1st, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Leonardo Bonucci. The elite Italian center back for Juventus is turning 35, and my intention with this profile is, of course, to shed some attention to how Leonardo Bonucci, of course, got to where he is right now, as he was one of the main contributors of helping Italy win the Euros, the European Championship, and considering he's literally been one of the best Italian defenders for the last 10, 15 years, and I haven't done a profile for him before. Now, I do think that this is the time to really give him a profile, because I do think that after showing that he was one of the best defenders in the world just this past summer, I do think that he deserves that respect of having me go through from what he's been able to accomplish from the moment that he made it onto the senior circuit. As of course, it's a lot of Italian kids' dreams to grow up and play for the old lady, the historic Juventus football club. And the fact that he played there and both Milan clubs, I think, is pretty impressive in itself. He is a player that's stood out and been recognized as one of the best defenders, not just in Italy and in the world as well. So I do think that Bonucci deserves his credit and he deserves his respect, especially going into this. But with that said, I'm going to take a really quick look at how his career has really played out from the beginning up until now, as he is a player that's been recognized more than once as the FIFA Pro World 11, one of the best defenders in football. With that said, he's originally from Viterbo, Italy. He will go on to make his senior debut playing for the Viterbese national team in 2005-2006. And then he finally got his first actual game that he played. His first appearance was made on loan at Inter Milan. He would go on to play just one game, and this was, of course, a season in which they won a title. So he was, of course, a part of that championship incredibly early on. I mean, that is the only time that he won a Serie A title, and he wasn't on Juventus. And this was, of course, a season, one of the season in which they won the Serie A 5 years in a row. This was the first of that year. But following that season, he would go on to miss his entire next season, as he was, of course, signed by Inter Milan, but there were, of course, players that they wanted to play over him. So they ended up putting him on loan at Serie A B clubs Treviso and Pisa. His very first season at Treviso would be his age 20 season in 2007-2008. In Serie A B, he would go on to start 20 of the 27 matchups, as he actually ended up scoring a couple of the goals himself. Following that year, he would, of course, return to Treviso, and then in his age 21 season, he would go on to start 10 of the 13 seasons he played. Or 10 of the 13 matches he played, as they ended up finishing 22nd in the second division in Italy for that year. But of course, he would go on to catch his very big break the next season, as in 2008-2009, during his age 21 season, he would get moved to another Serie B team. He played for Pisa, of course, where the Leaning Tower of Pisa is, and he would go on to play 18 games, as he was able to add a goal in that season. Following that season, he would go on to be noticed by Serie A club Bari, he would go on to play one season with Bari in his age 22 season in 2009-2010. He would go on to play all 38 Serie A games, as Bari would go on to finish 10th in the entire league. He even finished with a goal and a couple of assists himself. The team actually conceded about 9 more goals than matches played, but he was able to record 11 clean sheets. And following that 2009-2010 season for Bari, he would go on and get moved up to the Italian national team. He will go on to play for Italy in what would be the World Cup, as he would go on to make his debut in March of 2010, as the World Cup would happen later that summer. In his very first appearance with Italy at the World Cup, and I guess he didn't play a single game, but he still was on the team. Italy would go on and get knocked out of the group stage, as they ended up drawing with Paraguay and New Zealand. They ended up losing to Slovakia. This is the World Cup after they had won the World Cup in 2006. But just to give a sense of when Leonardo Bonucci entered the picture, Following Italy's first exit from the World Cup with Leonardo Bonucci as a member of the team, he of course would get signed by Juventus, which is one of the nation's most cherished and one of the most storied franchises. His very first season with Juventus would be his age 23 season in 2010-2011. This is the year before Juventus went on their streak of winning the Serie A. In that season, he would go on to start 32 of the 34 matchups he played in a season where Juventus would go on to finish 7th in Serie A. This is the last time that they had finished that low in a bit. But in those Serie A games, he was able to go on to finish with, like I said, 2 goals scored himself. And even in the Europa League that they played in, he would make sure that the team conceded 4 goals in the 8 matches he played, as they would allow 4 clean sheets. In that Juventus season, they would go on and get knocked out in the group stage of Europa League, and they also lost in the quarterfinal of Coppa Italia. In the quarterfinal round, they would eventually find themselves losing in that round, as the team that would eventually knock them out of the quarterfinal round would end up being Roma. But following that season, in which Juve did not really win a title, he would come back for what would be a much stronger second season with the club. Bonucci's second season with Juventus would be his age 24 season in 2011-2012. In his second season with a Serie A giant club, he would go on to start 28 of the 32 matchups he played in a season where Juventus would go on to win the Serie A for the first time as a club officially since 2002-2003. And this would come after, within that season, they had won the league, but due to the Calciopoli scandal, they ended up having to forfeit the title. But 2011-2012 was the first time they had won in quite a bit. Within that season, Leonardo Bonucci will go on to score a couple of goals from himself from the defensive spot. He would go on to make sure that the team conceded 17 goals in the 32 matches he played. In that second season, he would go on to make sure that Juventus had 18 clean sheets in the majority of the games he played. So they would go on to take home that trophy. That would be the first time that Leo Bonucci would go on to win the Serie A as a full-time starter. And then in addition to winning Serie A, Juventus would then go on to finish as runners-up in the Coppa Italia. They would go on to lose all the way in the final, as the team that would end up beating them was Napoli at the very end, as Edison Cavani would be one of the players that helped put them away. But in addition to that, within that season, he would go on to finish with 5 goals conceded in that Coppa Italia run. Following that 2011-2012 season, he would go on to make an appearance with Italy in the Euros in 2012. And then once he made an appearance with Italy in the Euros in 2012, they would go on to make it out the group stage, drawing with Spain, Croatia, and then beating Ireland. They would go on to draw with England and then beat them on penalty kicks in the quarterfinals. They would go on to beat Germany in the semifinals 2-1 before they ended up losing 4-0 to Spain in the finals, as Bonucci was a very big part in helping Italy make it all the way that far. But of course they would finish up as the runners-up. Following that, he would return for what will be his third season at Juventus, and in his age 25 season in 2012-2013, Bonucci would start all 33 of the games he played in a season where Juventus would repeat, and they would go on to win Serie A for the second year in a row. This is the first time Serie A was repeat champions since, of course, 2003. Within that season, he would go on to make sure that the team would allow 21 goals in the 33 matchups he played. He had 16 clean sheets. Second season in a row, he's had at least 15, which is a crazy number in itself. He would go on to play 4 games in a Coppa Italia run that would see Juventus lose in the semifinals. And once they made it all the way to the semifinals, the team that would knock them out would end up being Lazio. But in addition to that, they would go on to win the Super Coppa Italia that year, as they ended up beating Napoli 4-0. So that would be the first time that Bonucci would help the team win the Super Coppa. And then they would end up losing in the quarterfinals of Champions League that season, as the team that would eventually knock them out would be Bayern Munich, as Bayern Munich would go on to win Champions League, as they virtually won everything in 2012, 2013. But that was Bonucci's second season there, and that would be the first time that he had, or his third season there, second time he had won the Serie A title, first time he had won the Supercoppa. And following that, he would return for what would be his fourth season with Juventus, his age 26 season in 2013-2014. In that season, he would go on to start 28 of the 29 matches he played, as he would help Juve win the Serie A for the third time in a row. This is the first time that Juve has won 3 Serie A titles in a row since the 1930s. So, of course, this is a very big season for them. This is their 30th Serie A title as a whole. In that season, he would go on to make sure that he would score 2 goals and even add 3 assists. His 3 assists are the most that Bonucci has been able to add within a season. And in addition to winning the Serie A for the third year in a row, they would go on to lose in the quarterfinals of the Coppa Italia, as the team that would eventually knock them out would end up being Roma. And even in the Coppa Italia, he would go on to even play 1 game and even concede a goal. In addition to that, he would go on to play in the Supercoppa Italia, where they would go on to win it for the second year in a row. This year, they ended up beating Lazio in order to pick up their second title, like I just said. Taking a look at how it fared in the European level, they would end up getting knocked out of Champions League group stage just to go all the way to the semifinals of the Europa League tournament. And once they made it to the semifinals, they would end up losing to Benfica, as Benfica ended up losing to Sevilla in the Europa League finals this year. But that would be how Juventus' season would play out. And following his third straight Serie A title season, in his fourth season with Juventus after his first World Cup appearance, he would go on to make an appearance with Italy in the 2014 World Cup, as this is the only World Cup in which he actually has played a game, if I'm not mistaken. He would only go on to play 1 game in a stretch that would see Italy go on and lose in the group stage. They ended up beating England 2-1 in that was the only game they won. They ended up losing 1-0 to Costa Rica and 1-0 to Uruguay, as that is the last time that Italy has appeared at the World Cup. But of course, and that saying that because they missed 2018 and they are going to miss the 2022 World Cup. But of course, following that early exit, Bonucci would go on to return for his fifth season with the Juventus club. In his age 27 season, he would start 33 of the 34 Serie A matchups in a season where Juventus would win the Serie A for the 4th time. This is the first time since the 30s that Juventus has won 4 in a row, as they won 5 in a row back then. But this was, of course, this was the 31st time that they had won a title. In this season, Leo Bonucci will go on to add 3 goals. This is the first time that he scored 3 goals within a Serie A season. And then, of course, the Juventus club would then go on to win the Coppa Italia for the 10th time, for the first time since Bonucci was there. Within that season, he would go on to play 4 games, as he conceded 4 goals and even scored a goal for himself. And then looking at how they would fare in the Coppa Italia, they would go all the way to the championship round. They would end up beating Lazio in the final. So that'd be the first time he won that. Taking a look at how they fared in the Italian Supercoppa, they would finish as runners-up, as they ended up losing to Juventus, or they ended up losing to Napoli on penalty kicks, as Bonucci was able to sink his, but they ended up losing in the end. And then they would end up finishing as runners-up in the Champions League this year. They would go all the way to the final before they would end up losing to Barcelona. This is the year when Barcelona had Messi, Suarez, and Neymar, as Italy were one of the top teams, as Juventus was definitely making its case for one of the top teams in Europe, and Bonucci was a very big part of that, as in that Champions League run, he would play 13 of those matchups. The team would concede 9 goals, and they would, of course, have 6 clean sheets in that run, as they got really close to the end but didn't have the cigar. Following that, Leo Bonucci would return to Juve for what would be his 6th season with the club. And in his age 28 season, he would start 35 of the 36 Serie A matchups. And the most Serie A games that he has played since his Bari year. He would go on to do this for a Juventus team that would finish with its fifth straight Serie A title for the first time since the 30s, like I've been mentioning. In that particular season, Leo Bonucci would be named the Italian Player of the Year in 2016, by the way. He will go on to finish with 3 goals and an assist, tied for the most goals he's had in a season, along with, adding an assist. Not many times you can add an assist as a defensive player. In addition to what he was able to do in Serie A, in addition to what he was doing offensively, the team would concede 18 goals in the 36 matches he played, as he had 20 clean sheets. This would be the 5th Serie A season in a row in which the team was able to put up at least 15 clean sheets. And in 2016, that was the first time they put up 20 within a full year. In addition to that, he would go on to play 4 Coppa Italia matchups, as Juventus would end up winning Coppa Italia for the second year in a row, the second time since he had been there. They would go on to beat AC Milan in the final, as their lone goal came from Morata. They would end up being the champions of the Italian Supercoppa, making it the 3rd trophy that they would win for the year, as they ended up beating Lazio in the final. However, in terms of trying to win every single title in the continent, they fell short in the Champions League round of 16, as this was the year where they were knocked out very early on from Bayern. Bayern would go on to the semifinal, where they were knocked out by Madrid, and Madrid would end up losing Atletico Madrid would end up losing to Real Madrid in the final. But that would be how that Champions League season would end, as Bonucci would pick up his 3. This would be the lone season in which Bonucci would pick up 3 trophies for Juventus. And then following that season, he would, of course, compete with Italy in the 2016 Euros. In the Euros, they would make it through after beating Belgium and Sweden in the group stage, and then they lost to Ireland. In the round of 16, they would beat Spain 2-0 to advance to the quarterfinals. And in the quarterfinals, Bonucci would score Italy's lone goal in regulation versus Germany. However, they would actually lose on penalties, as Germany would be the team to advance. That would be how Italy exited the Euros, the tournament, before they actually came back and won it. But, of course, following that season, Bonucci would return to Juventus for his 7th season. His 7th season with the club was his age 29 season in 2016-17, and in that season he would start 26 of the 29 games he played. In a season where Juventus would win the Italian Serie A, the league, for the 6th year in a row. That's the first time they had done it, and this would be in Bonucci's 7th year with the club. He would go on to score 3 goals on the offensive side, and then on the defensive side, he would make sure that the team conceded 22 goals in the 29 games he played. They had 12 clean sheets. This would be the 6th season in a row that he's had double-digit clean sheets for a top Serie A side in every single year that he played in. In addition to that, he would play 5 Coppa Italia games, conceding 5 goals, as the Serie A side would go on to win the Coppa Italia for the 3rd year in a row. This year, they would go all the way to the final, where they would beat Lazio in the final, as Bonucci would score Juventus' 2nd goal, the cherry on top goal that would give him this win. In addition to this, they would end up making the final for everything that they really could compete in. In the Italian Supercoppa final, they would end up losing to AC Milan on penalty kicks. And then once they made it to Champions League, they would be runners-up for the 2nd time in a 3-year span, as they ended up losing in the very end to Real Madrid. That is the last time that Juventus has been to the Champions League final, as a matter of fact. But following that 2016-2007, well, I guess also looking into what he did in that Champions League run, he played 11 games. He allowed 5 goals in that span, as the team had 7 clean sheets, which would make sense as to why they were in the final that year, as the Champions League final, I believe, was the same day I graduated from high school. But following that season, Leonardo Bonucci would return to Juventus he would not actually return to Juventus for his age 30 season. He would actually take a really quick year and then play with AC Milan, as AC Milan would go on to sign him for a 5-year deal. in the middle of his 2017-18 season in his age 30 season with Milan. He would go on to be named to the FIFA Pro World 11 as he was named one of the best center backs in the world following that stretch with Juventus that helped lead them to the final. But in his loan season with Milan, he would go on to start all 35 of the matchups he played for a team that finished 6th in all of Italy. On the offensive side, he had 2 goals and an assist. And on the defensive side, he would make sure that they would allow 35 goals in the 35 matches he played. He would go on to finish with 11 clean sheets on the season. And in addition to that, in AC Milan's loan season with him there, they would go on and finish runners-up in the Coppa Italia that year. And they would end up losing in the Europa League round of 16 that year, as the team that would eventually go on to knock them out would be Arsenal. Arsenal will go on to make it to the semifinals, where they would lose to Atletico Madrid, as Atletico Madrid went on to win the entire tournament. Following his loan season with AC Milan in 2018, he would, of course, go on to, after Italy had missed the World Cup, he would go on to return and go right back to Juventus, this place where, of course, he was really kind of balling. In his first season back in Juventus, which would, of course, be his 8th season there, in his age 31 season in 2018-19. Leo Bonucci would start 27 of the 29 matches he played for a Serie A team that would go on to win their 8th straight Serie A title, as Bonucci was there for 7 of them. In that Serie A stretch, Leo Bonucci would go on to finish with 3 goals himself. And then on the defensive side, Bonucci's defense would allow 19 goals in the 29 matches he played, as they had 11 clean sheets. Yet another season in Serie A with a double-digit amount of clean sheets. And at least looking as far back as 2012, this is, of course, going on to be the 8th year in a row that he was able to do that. He went on to play 1 Coppa Italia matchup in a season in which Juventus would lose in the quarterfinals. They would end up losing in this quarterfinal round to Atalanta. In the Super Cup, they would go on to beat Milan, the team that at least the team that Bonucci was playing on, as the lone goal in this matchup would come from Cristiano Ronaldo. They would end up losing in the Champions League quarterfinal, however, as the team that would eventually knock them out would be Ajax. Ajax would end up losing to Tottenham in the semifinal, and Tottenham would end up losing to Liverpool in the Champions League final, to get a sense of how that season ended. But following Ronaldo's first season with the team, Leonardo Bonucci would, of course, return and in his age 32 season, as he would play all 35 games. He would start all 35 games he played for a Juventus side that would go on and finish with the best record in the Serie A. 2019-2020 was the last year of their streak in which they won the Serie A 9 years in a row. That is the last streak that they have the longest streak that they've ever had, as they won their 36th total Serie A title. And this is, of course, the season in which the end of the season was definitely pushed back because of COVID. But he would go on to play, he would score 3 goals within that particular season for Juve on the offensive side. On the defensive side, the team allowed 34 goals in the 35 matches he played, as he had 12 clean sheets, making it the 9th season in a row, starting for a top-tier Serie A club that had a double-digit amount of clean sheets. In the Coppa Italia, Leo Bonucci would go on to play 4 games for a Juventus side that would go on and finish as runners-up in the entire tournament. They would go on to the very end before they lost to Napoli on penalty kicks, as Bonucci was able to make his penalty kick. But in addition to that, they would finish as runners-up in the Supercoppa Italia, as they lost to Lazio 3-1. But taking a look at how even Bonucci would fare in Champions League, he would go on to play 7 matches in a Champions League run that would see Juve lose in the round of 16. In the round of 16, Juventus ended up losing to Lyon. Lyon would go all the way to the semifinals, where they lost to the eventual Champions League winners, Bayern Munich. And then following that 2019-2020 season, this would lead us into the last full season that Leo Bonucci has finished up until this date. In his age 33 season in 2020-2021, He went on to start 23 of the 26 matchups he played for a Juventus squad that would go on to finish fourth in Serie A as they barely were able to qualify for Champions League in Ronaldo's last season there. In that Serie A season, he would go on to finish with 2 goals himself on the offensive end. He would also make sure that the team conceded 21 goals in the 26 matches he played, as they had 5 clean sheets as a team. In the Coppa Italia, he would play 2 games in a stretch in which Juve would be the Coppa Italia champions for the 5th time since they had been there that year. So, of course, congratulations to them. They would go on to beat Atalanta in the final. They would go on to win the Supercoppa Italia for the 5th time since he had been there as well. This would be the 2nd year that he had been there in which he had won the Coppa Italia and the Supercoppa Italia in the same year, as this was the season in which Juve would end up beating Napoli in the final. However, in Champions League, the last season in 2020-2021, Juventus would find themselves losing to Porto, as Porto would end up losing to the eventual champions Chelsea in the quarterfinals. So that's how that season would end. Once that 2020-2021 Juve season would come to an end, that would be, of course, his 10th season with the side. He would go on and compete with Italy in the 2021 Euros, because they're supposed to be for 2020, but they got pushed back a year because of COVID. In the group stage, Italy would go on to beat Turkey 3-0. They beat Switzerland 3-0, and they beat Wales 1-0 to make it to the knockout stage. They would go on to beat Austria 2-1 in London to make it to the quarterfinals. In Munich, they would beat Belgium 2-1 to make it to the semifinals. They would go on to beat Spain in the semifinals 4-2 off of penalty kicks. And then they will go on to beat England in the championship, as the lone goal scored for them would be scored by Leo Bonucci. And then they would, of course, win on penalty kicks in order to beat England and win the Euro championships for themselves. Very big win. I believe it's the first time that Italy has probably won it. I guess it's the first time they've won it since 1968. So, of course, congratulations for them for, of course, winning it and getting. And Leo Bonucci was a big part of them winning, as he did score the goal in regulation. And of course, he took all the pictures with Giorgio Chiellini on the plane while on the way back. But Bonucci was a very big part of Italy winning that title. And of course, considering he's won so many titles with Italy, the fact that he won a continental title with Italy, I believe, kind of cements his Italian legacy. But this, of course, would transition into the season that he's currently playing right now. In his age 34 season, in which he's turning 35 today, he started 18 of the 20 games he's played so far for a Juve side that is currently holding the 4th best record in Serie A. They're sitting 7 points clear of 5th place Lazio with 1 less game played, so it looks as though Juve is going to qualify for Champions League yet another year. With 4 games left in their schedule, they are sitting 8 full games behind 8 full points behind Milan, so it doesn't feel as though Juve is going to win Serie A this year. And then taking a look at how their Champions League season ended, they went on to the round of 16 as they were eventually eliminated by Villarreal, who's still active in the semifinal. But right now, that just gives you an idea of how their season has really led to where it is right now. And Leo Bonucci is a very big part of it. And considering he's 35 now, and he's coming off of a season where he was named to the last FIFA Pro Final 11, as he was one of 3 Italian players that was named following the Euros, alongside Gianluigi Donnarumma and Jorginho. He was the only player that represented Juventus. I guess he and Cristiano Ronaldo were the 2 players that represented Juventus on this team, to give you a sense of how well Bonucci has been playing. And because of that, I think it would be kind of ridiculous for me to ignore that Leo Bonucci has been one of the best center backs and one of the best all-around soccer players in the world. I want to take this time to thank all the Football Reference and FIFA websites for giving me all the facts and figures that I needed. And I do want to thank everyone for listening to all 29 minutes of this piece. If you ever do get a chance to watch Leo Bonucci, I would recommend doing so. He wears number 19 for Juve, and he's currently starting for the Italian national team as well. He is one of those players where it's like, I don't know when his last game is going to be, but even while he's playing right now, I do recognize that he is one of the best. I did want to take this time. I want to thank everyone once again. I hope all is well, and I will catch you with more of the elite once we get through it every day at a time. Thanks for listening. I hope all is well. Thanks for listening to my piece, and peace out. I'll catch you with more tomorrow.